Most Darkest Dungeon players could hardly be blamed for not knowing the character's default names before the release of the sequel. In the original, every character other than Renault and Dismas come with a name randomly selected from a pool of available in-game names. However, that's not to say that the Crusader and the Highwayman are the only ones with canon names. In fact, not only every hero possesses their own unique canon name, but these are often fairly meaningful to their character, and even went through changes as the game progressed. Today I would like to take a look at those names, their historical importance, and how they relate to each of the heroes. And what better person to help me with this than the Darkest Dungeon storyteller himself, the Miskatonic Memorialist.
That would be me. I've spent my days in rumored shadowed halls, uncovering rarities and forgotten lore. Check out my channel and my videos. Plenty of Darkest Dungeon content to watch. Now, let me share with you the terrible wonders I have come to know.
Without any further ado, let's begin. The character of Crusader, by default named Renault, is named after Crusader of the Second Crusade, Renault of Chatillon. Renault, also known as Renault, and even Reginald, became infamous for his highly destructive raids, with the most devastating one probably taking place in Cyprus. He also gained notoriety after he captured the Patriarch of Antioch, Aymery of Limoges, and tortured him because the Patriarch refused to pay him a subsidy. His greed is reflected in Renault's famous kleptomaniac trait. Eventually, he came to serve King Baldwin IV, where he was the only crusader actively attacking the Islamic states. Ultimately, Renault met his end when, after a grueling battle, he was captured by Saladin, one of his greatest enemies, who offered him a chance of conversion or death. Renault refused to abandon his faith and was subsequently killed. Similar to the in-game Renault, he was a complicated character, on one hand cruel and merciless, but also brave and committed to his faith.
The Highwayman, with the default name of Dismas, is named after one of two criminals crucified alongside Jesus. While the other thief refused to accept the responsibility for his crimes, mocked Jesus, and questioned his divinity, Dismas instead showed dignity in the face of his death, rebuked the other criminal, and asked Jesus to remember him in his kingdom, a plea widely interpreted as a plea of forgiveness, though not necessarily salvation. Jesus, moved by his honest regret and guilt, promised Dismas that he'll join him in paradise, giving him the historical nickname of the Penitent Thief. The in-game Dismas shows similar traits to the biblical counterpart. After unknowingly murdering a woman and her child during a robbery gone wrong, the Highwayman is devastated and haunted by guilt. He hopes that perhaps traveling with the air alongside this old road, the likes of him and Renault will finally find their redemption. And if you want to get to paradise, you better be ready to travel through hell.
The Plague Doctor's canon name, Paracelsus, comes from a Swiss physician, Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, widely known by his shorter, catchier nickname. Paracelsus was a gifted alchemist, lay theologian, and philosopher of the German Renaissance, as well as one of the pioneers of the medical revolution taking place in the 1600s. Credited as the father of toxicology, the study of chemical compounds on organisms, he also coined the famous phrase, "the dose makes the poison." The parallels between the two are fairly obvious, with the in-game Paracelsus being a gifted physician, an alchemist, and an apparent inventor of plague grenades and other poisonous weaponry.
Hellion is canonically named Boudica, after the historical warrior queen of the British Iceni tribe, who led a massive uprising against the Roman Empire back in 61 AD. Boudica's family met a terrible fate at the hands of the imperial politicians, who wanted to ensure a Roman governor would seize control of their kingdom, despite earlier promises of friendship. She would then proceed to enact a terrible revenge on the Roman population, massacring entire settlements and killing thousands of people, including women and children, before finally suffering a crushing defeat. Boudica died soon after, either from illness or by committing suicide via poison. She is now considered a folk hero in modern-day Britain, as a symbol of unrelenting rebellion, even in the face of overwhelming odds. A parallel to the original fate proposed to the Hellion, before her cowardness got the better of her.
Vestal, bearing the official name of Junia, was named after one of the apostolic women in the New Testament. Sometimes thought to be Joanna, one of the disciples traveling with Jesus, as well as one of the women who visited his grave and saw Jesus after his resurrection. Interestingly, in the Orthodox tradition, it is said that Junia traveled far and wide to proselytize, converting pagan temples into Christian ones, while Darkest Dungeon's Junia leaves or is exiled from a temple due to her lack of piety. The Orthodox Christianity teaches that she traveled with a man named Andronicus, with whom she spent some time in Roman prison as part of religious persecution, and they both died as martyrs. Perhaps it is a bit of a reach, but it is nonetheless interesting that the biblical Junia had a male companion with whom she spent her life, while Darkest Dungeon's Junia dreams of one, leading to her banishment and arrival in the hamlet. The leper owes his name to one of the most interesting historical rulers of the medieval period, Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, the Leper King. Baldwin was renowned by both his contemporaries and historians for the truly royal, dignified, stoic acceptance of his fate, his wise and just rule, and his prowess as a military strategist, successfully defending the Crusader state of Jerusalem against the neighboring Islamic states, especially the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, the Saladin. His marvelous military might was achieved due to, in no small part, Renaud of Chatillon, to whom he granted the city of Hebron, making him one of the wealthiest barons in Jerusalem, and employing the unyielding Renaud to fight against Saladin in many battles. The in-game leper is depicted as a noble and stoic warrior poet, putting the well-being of his kingdom above his own, and accepting his fate of suffering and death. A truly worthy homage to one of history's most noble kings.
The bounty hunter, Tardif, was named after a Red Hook team member, Pierre Tardif. There are no obvious similarities or deeper themes here, at least not that we know, although it is quite an achievement when the biggest butchering bastard in Darkest Dungeon gets named after you.
The Flagellant, whose canon name is Damien, was named so after Saint Peter Damian, who introduced flagellation to the Catholic Church, where he would become a Benedictine monk and later cardinal. He was born in a noble yet poor family, forcing him to live in the employ of his brother who underfed and abused him, as well as forcing him to work as a swineherd. A priest named Damien felt pity for him and took him in, becoming a mentor figure to him. Eventually, Peter took the name Damien in gratitude, acknowledging him as family. Known for his extreme fervor, both as novice and priest, he quickly became too extreme for the other monks, developing insomnia due to his habits. Initially, his methods of penitence were met with some pushback, but his advocacy has proven very persuasive. Ironically, he would later on have to temper some of the most overzealous flagellants himself. There are multiple parallels between the historical figure and the in-game flagellant. Both start in poverty before feeling a call to life of piety. Both belong to an extremist faction within their respective churches. Both seem to suffer from insomnia, as Flagellant scorns the comfort of camping in the game. And most obviously, both treat their flagellation as an act of serving the divine.
The man-at-arms, Barristan, is named after a character from A Song of Ice and Fire, Barristan Selmy, or Barristan the Bold, who's an old warrior and knight who has served and fought in many battles over the years. He is more experienced than anyone else and recognizes that his final days are approaching. The parallels to Darkest Dungeon's Barristan are really only in name and age, as Darkest Dungeon's Barristan was a military commander who was promoted to a position of leadership and failed to lead his men in battle, leaving him racked with survivor's guilt and a sense of betrayal to his men. While Barristan the Bold did betray his post in a sense, after his dismissal from the King's Guard, he traveled east to Essos to serve Daenerys Targaryen, turning his back on his former allegiances. Both recognize that they are better serving on the front lines of the battle and might as well go out swinging.
Shieldbreaker, Amani, whose name means both wishes and aspirations. The symbolism here is pretty straightforward, as Shieldbreaker aspires to be more than a prized possession. She wishes to be freed from her burden, and her liberation comes in the form of her mutilation by vipers.
The Arbalest canon name, Missandei, is both a clever play on words Miss and Die, as well as a Game of Thrones reference. Missandei from A Song of Ice and Fire, while her counterpart is more of a scholar and translator for her slave masters than a mercenary. They both suffered trauma at a young age. Darkest Dungeon's Missandei witnessed the death of her father by the hands of an angry mob, while Game of Thrones' Missandei was taken from her home of Nath and sold in Astapor as a slave. This one's a bit of an issue.
Antiquarian is a bit of a conundrum. Her initial name was Josephine, with neither an obvious joke or symbolism there.
Only later to be changed to Catherine. Or maybe it was Catherine to Josephine. Either case, both are equally mysterious and have no deeper link to her character. Anyways, here's this.
Jester is one of the characters who started with a different, sillier name in the early access, Jingles, simply referencing the bells attached to his costume and the unique sound he makes while he walks, and received a more serious canon name later on, in the form of Sarmenti, a reference to Sarmentus, a jester mentioned in the Satires by the Roman poet Horace.
Grave Robber, who bears the canon name of Audrey, was named after Audrey Barassa, the wife of the game's writer, artist, and key developer, Chris Barassa. A very sweet gesture, and let's face it, of all the couples in Darkest Dungeon, this one just makes the most sense. They even have the same gallows sense of humor.
The Houndmaster and his faithful beast were initially named Shaggy and Scoob, an obvious reference to the Scooby-Doo franchise and its key characters of Norville, Shaggy, Rogers, and the titular dog, only to be renamed in a more serious manner, now being canonically named William and Fergus. While these names don't seem to have any deeper meanings, they are a bit more fitting. Also, both of these names are popular in Ireland, and Fergus is an Irish wolfhound. However, they also cause a bit of a confusion, since William refers to his hound as a she. Very mysterious, but let's move on.
The Abomination, named Bigby, is named after the protagonist of the Fables comic series, as well as the acclaimed episodic video game, The Wolf Among Us. Similar to the Abomination, Bigby from the comics can change from his form, from fully human to fully lupin, and struggles with his animalistic side, as his bloodlust has caused plenty of suffering in the past. Both in his comic book incarnation, as well as the game, Bigby tries to prove that he is not a monster by protecting the inhabitants of the Fable world, similar to how the Abomination tries to do so by combating the horrors of the Darkest Dungeon.
The Musketeer's first canon name was Quiet, after a character from the Metal Gear series who's a markswoman as well. Her new official name, Margaret, is a tad more serious but doesn't really bear much relevance to her character. The only possible meaning it could have would be in reference to the character of Marguerite from the BBC's The Musketeers TV series.
The occultist's canon name, Alhazred, is an H.P. Lovecraft reference, fitting for a game like Darkest Dungeon. Abdul Alhazred is the in-universe writer of the Necronomicon, also a bit of a self-insert for Lovecraft in that sense. He's known as the Mad Arab. According to the Lovecraft lore, Alhazred was a mad poet of Sana'a, Yemen, circa 700 AD. He visited the ruins of Babylon and the subterranean secrets of Memphis, and spent 10 years alone in the great southern desert of Arabia, an area referred to as the empty space of the ancients, which is believed to be inhabited by protective evil spirits and monsters of death. Of this desert, many strange and unbelievable marvels are told by those who have claimed to have been there. It is therefore a fitting name for a scholar who willingly sought out the eldritch forces of the Darkest Dungeon universe and made a pact with them, gaining both great power and terrible knowledge in the process.
Huge thanks to Miskatonic Memorialist for lending his invaluable insight and hard work, without which this video wouldn't have been made. Make sure to check out his channel and subscribe for the most high quality videos regarding Darkest Dungeons lore. And if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, leave a like and a comment on what else you'd like to see.
Always a pleasure. Share the love. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments, and I look forward to any collabs in the future. And to you, dear viewer, thank you for watching.